Welcome in for the 7th straight time this season, a victorious edition of the Pacific Office Automation Postgame Scoreboard Show. The number 2 Oregon Ducks march into West Lafayette tonight and post a 35-0 victory over the Purdue Boilermakers to improve to 7-0. Ryan Buckley, Will Ortner, Jordan Schultz, all here with you on a Friday evening. Fellas, it was clean, it was dominant, it was about as much as you could have wanted for a short week road game following a massive program or season-defining win. Will, what jumped out to you?
I like that you started out fast. Your first 3 drives, you go down and you get points, especially putting up those 14 points early. Like, that's a spot. This game is a spot. It's why, like, it felt like the hot pick with a lot of the national pundits was like, watch out for Purdue. Like, they're the spoiler makers for a reason.
I did hear the spoiler maker thing this week.
Which,
yeah, that was...
you might have heard it from me because I thought it was really funny the first time I heard it.
It was cheeky.
I started claiming it. I'm not going to lie. I stole it from, like, Tom Fernelli or somebody. Like, I just was like, spoiler makers? That's great. Going to say it every spot I could. But the way that you don't allow them to have that opportunity is the exact opposite of what you did against Idaho. Against Idaho, you don't score, you let them hang around, and then all of a sudden it's the third quarter, and it's like, it's a 1-touchdown game. All of a sudden they have life, and they feel like they can get back into it on a fluky play or a flea flicker or something crazy like that. What does Oregon do? They go down and they score 2 touchdowns right away. I felt like they ran the ball pretty well to start the game. Obviously, they used a bunch of different backs. They used Dylan Gabriel to run a little bit as well. And then I felt like their passing attack, you're missing Terrence Ferguson, so you're missing that safety valve. That didn't matter at all. You still keep attacking the sides. That big play on the first drive to Evan Stewart, an incredible catch. I just felt like they had a great game plan early. You get up 14, you're up by 21 at the end of the second quarter, and then that game's pretty much over.
Schultz, I know that you sometimes have you're got the pulse a little bit high on these things, but you were pretty comfortable from the jump today?
Yeah, I didn't really feel like there was anything to worry about, like maybe Purdue is going to cover, but nope, that didn't even end up happening. It started out at like a 27.5-point line, climbed up to a 30.5-point line. What I noticed, though, I like that Will talks about from the get-go, the 21-point lead that they jumped out to in the first half. Those drives were all really long. They were something, the time of possession at halftime, Oregon was killing Purdue in that. It evened out in the second half because Purdue was able to string some long drives together. But just right on, Oregon coming out and really, like 75 yards down the field, then 99 yards down the field. You don't see 99.5-yard drives very often.
Yeah.
And for a team struggling with the rush today, they were still able to establish Jordan James. He scored 2 of those first 3. And ultimately, even though Oregon couldn't do everything they wanted to on offense, they still looked really good on offense. That was my biggest takeaway.
Yeah, I liked also, in watching the broadcast after that 99-yard touchdown drive, they said, first 99-yard touchdown drive since November of last season. I'm like, oh, so it's been less than a year since they've done this. I mean,
you think 11 months.
There was another streak
so this is normal.
that something that hadn't
a lot.
happened in over 3 decades did happen tonight. We'll get to that coming up in the next segment. But I just going back to your initial thought, Will, I think that was really important, and because of the fact that there were. I get why the pundits were on it, I guess, is what I'm saying. You're coming off a huge win of your own, emotional letdown spot. Short week, first time traveling, the 2+ time zone situation. Their quarterback and play caller are new. You don't have a lot of film on them. All the makings, all the right ingredients for an upset were there, for the spoiler makers to rear their ugly heads were there. But I just like that Dan Lanning and the entire Duck squad just shut all of that down. They're just like, no. To a man, we have you personnel-wise, and it seemed like they kind of just did whatever they wanted tonight.
Right. Well, remember last year how every time we came on and they played an inferior opponent, it was almost like, hey, it's supposed to look a certain way. There's a standard that you need to play to, and it felt like they did that. This year, obviously, it kind of hasn't felt like that at times, but I think when you go back and you look at UCLA, it was like that aside from a pick 6 at the end of the second quarter.
Correct,
and
except
then
for one play.
Right. But that's a 14-point swing right there. So now all of a sudden you don't cover, and the game looks a little bit closer. The third quarter, you kind of play with your food a little bit. The Michigan State game, you let them come back and score late in that one. So it looks good early on. Oh, but by the way, you also have Dylan Gabriel with 2 red zone interceptions in that one. Yes, Gabriel had an interception in this one, but I felt like it was him trying to push the ball down the field. It was late in the second quarter. It wasn't in the red zone necessarily, right? Like you hadn't had a drive into the red zone where he throws the interception. And it doesn't come back to bite you, so maybe that's why it doesn't feel as maybe important, I guess is the wrong word there, but it's not as impactful. You don't remember it. It felt like for the first time it looked a certain way. You go down the list. Jordan James, he had 10 carries, but he had 50 yards. So that means he's averaging 5 a clip. Like, that's pretty good. Now you're able to get Whittington a lot of touches, an incredible touchdown catch by Noah Whittington.
And we'll talk more about him coming up later, but yeah, absolutely.
Unbelievable. It looked like those old 2002 Madden games where you
Yes.
throw it and your wide
Yeah.
receiver doesn't turn, but it goes through his back and he catches it. And you're like, I don't know how I did that, but that was awesome.
But the pirouette with the vice grip hands was very impressive.
Right. It was just an all-around good game. Tez Johnson looks good. Evan Stewart, yes, he only has 4 catches, but he's got 96 yards, and he has a big one that's almost for 50. Like, you just start going down the list defensively. Your defensive line got after the quarterback. You have multiple sacks. You have multiple tackles for loss. You have it from multiple different players. It's not just one guy that's getting it done. Your linebackers, Bossa and Betcher, did a great job on Purdue's running quarterback, Brown. Last week, the reason Purdue was able to get back in the game against Illinois is they didn't have a middle linebacker that could spy Brown and stay with Brown. So they either had to rush the edges, and then Brown was able to find an open wide receiver, or they had to try and spy, and Brown would outrun him. Guess what? You can't do that with this Oregon team, at least not with a quarterback like Brown. So it just felt like all the little things that everyone nationally looked and said, well, Oregon likes to play with their food. You didn't play with their food.
Nope.
Well, you got a running quarterback. That can be hard to stop. Your linebackers are faster than all the other linebackers in the country, or most of them at least. And so you're able to stop him there. Well, maybe the defense doesn't come out because you don't have Jordan Birch. They were clicking on all cylinders. Mateo Uiagalelei continues to take massive steps forward. That kid is unbelievable. And then offensively, your offensive line looks great. Yeah, you give up a sack, but sometimes that happens, and you run the ball well, and you throw the ball well as well. So I just felt like every single thing that everyone was worried about, you just went up and said, yeah, I'm going to check that box, check that box, check that box, and we're going to win, and we're going to win going away.
Yeah, can I add, too, that it was impossible for Purdue to throw pretty much at all during the game tonight? In the first quarter, they attempted 0 passes, which is surprising to me, and you wonder why the Spoilermaker's name is being attached to a team that is too scared to even pass the ball in the first quarter. And, Buck, I think you mentioned how great Oregon's secondary looked and really just kind of shut down. I mean, I don't know if Brown couldn't even recognize like a zone versus a man coverage, but it just seemed like he was making all the wrong throws when he was throwing the ball tonight, but Purdue was just scared to even have him throw.
Well, I pointed it out to you, Schulte, towards the end of the game because, Purdue was down 5 touchdowns, and the only way they could move the ball was running it, and not like
so weird.
You're behind, so you think we want to throw the ball to try to get back in the game, and obviously the result has far been decided at this point. But the fact that the more efficient way to try to get back in it is taking time off the clock and running the ball, because the passing situation is so futile for your team at that point in time. And it speaks volumes, I think, of really everything, all 3 levels of the defense, the pressure, the help from the linebackers, and then what you're able to do on the back end. And actually, it's a good segue. It brings us to our Ducks Game Day secret score.
Ducks Game Day secret score.
The Ducks Game Day secret score is 93. 93, that is the total number of passing yards allowed by this Ducks defense today. Under 100. I'd have to go and look at the statistical record books to find the last time that happened. But 93, just a lockdown performance from the secondary and the entire defense in this shutout victory. Just remember that number of 93 in the 7 a.m. hour of Monday morning's Dirt and Sprague. And listen, for the cue to text in, if you win, you could get the $100 gift card to Laurelhurst Market. It's more than just your friendly neighborhood steakhouse. Make your reservation today at laurelhurstmarket.com. Something special happened tonight in West Lafayette for the Ducks, something that hadn't happened in 32 years. If you're listening to the radio broadcast, you might have caught Dusty mention it towards the very end there, but we will get to that next. A stellar defensive effort from the Ducks tonight. But first, we toss it over to Schulte, who has the Ducks Game Day weather, brought to you every 10 minutes by Victor Rico's Mexican Food. Order Victor Rico's for your game day celebration in-store or online, for pickup or for delivery at victorricos.com.
Appreciate it, Buck. 55 right now in Portland. The Ducks postgame forecast calls for a low of 43. Tomorrow, cloudy with a high of 70. It's going to be in the 50s with a chance of rain when Oregon hosts Illinois next weekend.
Hey, it's Isaac Ropp for Window Nation. October is a critical time to check your home's windows. If yours are cracked or leaking and won't open or stay open, then it's time to call the pros at Window Nation. Right now, for every 2 windows you buy, you'll
trying to get to the end zone in the corner. He hit the pylon. But they're going to say he stepped out at the 1-yard line. Oregon with a formation that was really everybody in tight. And Gabriel, when he took that snap, he immediately sprinted to his left, as did Tez.
And to further review, the runner did break the plane of the goal line. Touchdown.
Touchdown, Tez Johnson. And Oregon makes it 20-0 here with 11:42 remaining in this first half.
This is the Pacific Office Automation Postgame Scoreboard Show on the Odyssey app and your home for Ducks football. 1080 The Fan. Pacific Office Automation. Problem solved.
Welcome back to the Pacific Office Automation Postgame Scoreboard Show. The number 2 Oregon Ducks victorious again. They improved to 7-0 on the short week victory in West Lafayette over the Purdue Boilermakers. 35-0 the final. And they did something tonight. Dusty mentioned on the broadcast, something they haven't done in 32 years. They pitched a road shutout. They haven't done that since they beat Oregon State 7-0 in the Civil War 1992 in Corvallis. So,
isn't it crazy? Like, I know Oregon hasn't necessarily been defense you, but Oregon's had some good defenses and played some really bad teams.
I think it's a testament to how hard it is to not surrender a single point on the road.
Yeah.
You can have fantastic, phenomenal teams. Even some of those national championship teams, a lot of the Nick Aliotti defenses, a lot of those teams had those bend but don't break mantras. This was a team tonight that just they didn't give anything. I mean, they got into field goal range at one point and obviously missed that. But you got to a situation tonight where Oregon just kind of decided they weren't going to let Purdue score, and Purdue didn't get to score. And I remember as a student seeing, I think it was also a 35-0 game final score at home against Stanford. The Ducks beat the Cardinal, and I want to say it was 04 or 05. But
I think I remember that.
It included an awesome goal line stand where they were penalized, and they actually needed 7 defensive plays at the goal line to finally shut them down. But that's when you have the whole support of your own crowd behind you too.
Yeah.
You go to a hostile environment, and by the way, this Purdue team scored 49 points last week. I know the opponent is totally different, but like they figured something out with their new play caller and their new quarterback.
Illinois isn't bad either. Like,
Right, so-
people don't give Illinois enough credit. They're in that second tier. Like, if Illinois, which isn't that crazy, is a 2-loss team, they might be a playoff team.
Yeah.
There's an opportunity there for them. So if you're able to go out and shut down a Purdue team, it's not the greatest attack of all time. Look, there's a reason why they're called Purdue, as Anthony would say. They're a bottom tier Big Ten team, but they're still a Big Ten team, and they've got dudes on both sides of the football. And you were able to shut them down, or you were able to completely score on them, whichever way you look at it. I think the other thing that it shows is Lanning won't let his guys take the foot off the gas.
Yes.
Because a lot of the time when you get on the road and you get up big, you get up 28, 35, dudes start trying to figure out what gas station they're going to hit for the midnight snack, right? Dudes are trying to figure out, hey, are we staying at the hotel? Like, what's going on here? What's going on tomorrow night? Are we going to be able to hang out with the girls? What's happening? Dudes are making plans already because dudes know game is over and dudes want to do dude things. Coach Lanning, on the other hand, is saying we can do dude things, but we're not doing dude things until the game is over. Because how often do you see that garbage time touchdown? Because the other team doesn't want to be shut out. The other head coach doesn't want to have that blemish on their resume.
Absolutely.
And they have something to fight for.
They had a full house tonight. It's a national game. I mean, this is going to happen a lot for the Ducks down the stretch here. You're going to be a lot of other teams' Super Bowl at this point in time. I mean, the chance to, at this point in time at 7-0, it might be hard to derail the Ducks from getting into the playoff. They are a ridiculous favorite to just be in the top 12 there at this point in time. But the chance to potentially keep them out of either a conference championship game, potentially keep them out of having a bye maybe, or just to be the blemish on that record, every student body, every opposing coordinator, everyone on every team is going to think, I've got my shot to take out the big dog now, and you're going to get that every night. And it didn't matter that Purdue had that shot tonight. They couldn't do anything. I just keep coming back to the Oregon football that I grew up on and that I learned in college and beyond that was so offensive minded. It was, whether it was even
Score
before,
fast.
even before Chip Kelly, like Bellotti was an offensive guy and he had Gary Croton, who was an offensive guy. And you think of good offensive players when you thought of Oregon football for a while. The defense may just well be this team's hallmark, despite the fact you have a Heisman candidate at quarterback, despite the fact you might have a Blitnikoff Award winner out wide. This defense is really freaking good. And I know you might not have been playing the best offense tonight, but what is standing out to you about them just collectively as an 11-man unit right now?
When I look at the defense, the defensive line, they're just always in the backfield. And it doesn't matter if it's Harmon. It doesn't matter if it's Birch. Birch has been out the last 2 games. Guess what? Mateo Uyunglele, he's young. He's always in the backfield.
And he's stellar.
Tatum Tuioti, again, he finally got another big stat game. It feels like every third game he gets a big stat game. But even when he's not getting big stats, he's creating havoc all over the place. And that makes life easier for your linebackers, for your safeties, for your corners. They don't have to cover as long. Linebackers, they're now running free and being able to make plays downhill. Bossa and Betcher are so fast. I mean, Bossa used to be a safety at one point. That's what he came to Oregon to be. And Oregon was smart enough to go, hey, we can bulk you up. You'll keep the same speed. And now you're playing linebacker for us. Bryce Betcher, I mean, you can see why he plays center field in college, And then if you look at the offensive side of the football, to me, it's the offensive line. Your 2 games that everyone always goes back to. You barely beat Idaho. You barely beat Boise State. Well, guess what? In the second half, you made a change at center. And since you've made that change, that offensive line has just gotten better and better and better. And now you're running the ball at the clip that everyone thought you would run the ball at. And Dylan Gabriel now looks comfortable enough to where he can sit in the pocket, take an extra second, let Evan Stewart get deep and make that throw. Now he's looking to the right side of the field, right? And there's no reason to hide anything anymore because you've already gone through your your Ohio State game.
Yep. Yeah,
you did it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're not hiding anything anymore. Everything is out on the table. You might be able to have a couple plays here and there, but your tendencies are now your tendencies. It's all out there. And you're still able to find ways to scheme guys open or to have guys win one-on-one matchups. And what both sides of the ball are doing right now is so impressive because even when you get up big, even when you see a mistake, it's just flush it. We got to go back out there and do it again and do it again and do it again. And that's coaching. That's Lanning and Stein and your defensive coordinator. That's everyone keeping your foot on the gas and not letting the players take their foot off the gas, which is so easy for college kids to do.
Really quickly to react to what Will said about the defense, it's worth noting that last drive that Oregon, actually I believe the 2 last drives that Oregon stopped them on downs at their own 20 or Oregon's 20 or 23 and then picked the ball off with Cam Alexander basically ending the game for Purdue was Oregon's second unit on defense. And Dan Lanning was still foaming at the mouth with guys like Blake Purchase and Ashton Porter and Cam Alexander getting a lot of their biggest action all year. And I think that goes further to, show what the program has now and what the belief in these even second string guys for Oregon is. And you talk about it, Will, keeping the foot on the gas, keeping your foot on their throat. And that to me was impressive. I know Purdue can't score. Their offense was ass tonight, but we're talking about a quarterback that literally had Heisman numbers last week. Brown threw for 300 yards and he ran for 100 plus against Illinois. And the fact that Oregon was able to contain him, even their second unit able to contain Purdue, I was super impressed.
Yeah, it's the best of both worlds, right? I'm looking here at the box score, and there are so many young men who contributed on the defensive side of the ball tonight, and they all contributed to the same shutout victory. And it felt like an ultimately collective effort tonight where a lot of players on both sides of the ball who we haven't talked about very much this season got some great opportunities, whether it was late in the game, whether it was towards the middle, or even early on because of absences of teammates or what have you. Lots of new faces popping up that we're going to be able to talk about tonight, and we're going to do that next here on the Pacific Office Automation Postgame Scoreboard show. But first, we'll toss it back over to Schultze with the Ducks Game Day weather, brought to you every 10 minutes by Victor Rico's Mexican Food. Order Victor Rico's for your game day celebration in-store or online for pickup or delivery at victorricos.com.
Thanks, Buck. It's 55 in Portland. The Ducks postgame forecast calls for a low of 43 tomorrow. Cloudy and a high of 70. It's going to be in the 50s with a chance of rain when Oregon hosts Illinois next weekend.
I'm Leif, owner of Leif's Auto Collision Centers.
He had Justice Lowe all alone down around the 5-yard line and did not see him.
Interception for Duke.
This is the Pacific Office Automation Post-Game Scoreboard Show on the Odyssey app and your home for Ducks football. 1080 The Fan. Pacific Office Automation. Problem solved.
Welcome back to the Pacific Office Automation Postgame Scoreboard Show. The Ducks victorious once again tonight. And as Will often says, or hopes that it does, it looked the way it was supposed to. A 35-0 victory. Easy, on the road, light work, and now they're coming home. Just was in contact with Dusty Hara, who we hope can join us later, but he said that they are racing fog to get back to Eugene. Apparently, if the fog rolls in too quickly, they will have to fly into Portland and bus back down to Eugene.
I have done that before.
So they're booking it. They're booking it.
It sucks. I'll tell you what, right now, there's nothing worse. I mean, for them, they're fine. They just kicked some butt. But getting my butt kicked in my college career ending and then finding out that instead of flying to Yakima, we were flying to Spokane.
Then you've got an extra 4-hour drive home.
It was 3 hours on the bus, but we had to wait for the buses to get from Yakima to Spokane.
No.
It was going to be the first time, dudes were doing what dudes do. The bar scene was set up. The girls were at the bar. Dudes were ready to be at the bar.
Yes.
It was very unfortunate.
Well, what was not unfortunate were the results tonight for the Oregon Ducks. Hopefully they make it back to Eugene tonight, and anybody still waiting up will still be there, as will they. But a lot of faces popping up tonight for the Ducks that we haven't talked a lot about this season. Part of it was because we're in a situation where blowout victory allows for more opportunities, but also it felt like there were some opportunities early in the game for players just based on other player absences that allowed for dudes to put some good stuff on tape. I'm thinking of guys like Kenyon Sadiq, who had a couple huge receptions early in that game for 58 yards that ended up being really meaningful, that Noah Whittington could spell Jordan James significantly. I mean, we were looking 2 weeks ago at, is Jordan James just the feature back and that's the way it's going to be? Well, they got about even touches tonight, and maybe if things are closer and maybe if it's the type of game that you really need to grind out, Jordan James gets a few more carries in there. But it's great that Noah Whittington, one, got a lot of touches and looked good doing it. Two, proves that he can be a huge threat in the receiving game. I was just excited to see a guy. I mean, this is by far the best performance that we've seen from him this season, except for maybe, the explosive kickoff return that was 99 yards and left on the goal line.
That he almost dropped. Yeah. Or I guess he technically did. Thank you, Jaden Lamar.
But nice to see him and a lot of others get back in the mix tonight and play meaningful football, productive football, and flex even more of this team's ridiculous depth.
Yeah, you know what I was wondering about that too is Jordan James the feature back, or does he work with this offensive line the best? Like, Jordan James is going to run through you. Noah Whittington is going to run away from you. And I wonder if early on, while the O-line was still working out, some of the issues that they had, it's better to just go with the power back. Like, Jordan will be able to run through people. And right now, this O-line, they seem to be missing one guy each time. They seem to be missing a backer or not getting to them. So let's go with Jordan James. And now as the offensive line has kind of settled in, now you might be able to see more of Noah Whittington. Also, coming off of a knee injury like that, it takes time. So it might be one of those things where it takes him a little bit to get back to where he needs to be. And he's clearly getting there. I mean, his catch
and can I ask you about that really quick? And we will talk about that catch. But let me ask you just about that return from injury. I feel like we've almost gotten to a point as sports fans where now we've seen so many finely tuned athletes come back really quickly and be successful. There's almost a new bar, a new expectation for how quick you're supposed to be able to do that.
It's Adrian Peterson's fault.
I mean, it was around this time last season that Whittington got hurt. And the fact that he's maybe not back to full speed until about 12 months from then makes a lot of sense. And you know, I was sitting there at the start of the season, maybe he doesn't look the same guy. It takes time. And I know you've dealt with injury with feet, ankles, stuff like that.
Ankles, knees,
But just maybe you can impress just how hard it is or what the process is like from a guy coming back from a serious injury, needing maybe some extra time and some extra reps to get to where he feels comfortable.
Yeah, well, everyone has been spoiled with knee injuries because of Adrian Peterson. Like, Adrian Peterson tears his ACL, and then 5 months later, he's the MVP, and he's 4 or 5 yards short of having the most rushing yards in an NFL season ever. And so everyone sees Adrian Peterson, and they're like, that's the standard. And it's like, no, that's the exception.
That's the unicorn.
And back in the day, it used to be you tear your ACL, you tear your MCL, you tear up your knee, your career's done.
Yep.
Now we have better surgeons and surgeries that can repair everything. But what people don't talk about is what type of surgeon do you have? What type of tear do you have? And how does your body recover from that? Because no body is the same, right? Like you can have an ACL tear. Is it a complete tear? Is it just torn by itself? Is there some damage to other spots? Are you able to now, like if you tear your ACL, are you able to take that ligament from your hamstring and then put it into your knee? Or do you have to go somewhere else? So there are just, people will say, oh, he tore his ACL, and then everyone thinks it's the same. It's never, ever, ever the same. And then your body recovers in its own way. And for a guy like Whittington, he was known for his speed and his elusiveness.
Mm-hmm.
He was almost like a slightly more elusive version of Bucky, but he didn't have the running through people that Bucky Irving had,
Sure.
right? Like Bucky Irving can run through tackles. Noah Whittington, I'm not saying that he's soft and he can't run
and he
through.
can shed
He's
some
just,
contact, but that wasn't the specialty of his game.
that's not his skill,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so when your skill is that elusiveness and that ability to be able to cut on a dime, when you go through a knee tear, it takes even longer for you because you have to build all that strength back up. The other thing is people will hear, oh, you get cleared after 6 months. You get cleared to start ramping up and working out.
Right.
So now, while everyone else has spent the off season working out their entire body and being able to go 100% at everything, at 6 months, now you're able to start going at 100% for everything. Like you could work out your body, but even if you have a tear in your ACL, that affects how you bench. That affects your squats. That affects your cleans. That can even affect your like curls, your shoulder press, stuff like that. Everything has to change. And so you don't really get to start working your body back. That's why they say it takes 18 months. Because the first 6 months you're recovering, and then you have a year to build yourself back up to where you were, where you have that atrophy effect, where you have to reverse it.
Yeah.
So I just think right now, to me, you're starting to see Noah Whittington kind of catch his stride, and I think it's going to continue to build as the season goes. This might be one of those guys where at the end, you're kind of looking at him, and we've talked about Evan Stewart in this way, but for a different reason, where you go, where was that guy at the beginning of the year? He's just come along, and in reality, it's, well, every single week, most guys are getting a little more beat up, getting more nicks, getting more scratches, getting more scrapes. He's actually getting stronger and getting better and getting tougher because his knee is getting healthier.
And you see what he's able to do now, a little bit of a coming out party for him running the football, but he did something today that we never even saw him do pre-knee injury last year. He came down with one of the best catches we're going to see this entire roster make all season.
I think it's one of the best catches of the college football season. He is like doing a reverse scorpion to catch the ball and then to have the wherewithal to know, I got to get my feet down. That's a good catch in the NFL.
Yeah.
That's a touchdown in the NFL. And
The coverage was pretty good.
Like, I think if you went to Cirque du Soleil at Jansen Beach, you saw less twist and bend than what he did in West Lafayette tonight. It was unbelievable. I was watching that play on my phone. I was driving in safely, not being dangerous as I got into the station, and I would never look at my phone. Please, State Patrol, don't ticket me. But I watched that play, and I almost had to pull over. I was like, oh, my God. Like, how did he make that play? How did he catch that ball?
Do you guys think that Whittington was the reason that Oregon was actually able to get their running game going? I know Jay Harris added a touchdown and some yards in garbage time, but I think at the end of the first quarter or even the end of the first half, the rushing yards were so little for Oregon. And Purdue has like the 5th worst rushing defense in the entire country. So was it Whittington that was able to get them out of that funk? Because that was surprising to me that Oregon, to start the game, even though their offense was going so well, that they could not run the freaking ball.
Yeah, that was a little bit odd to me. I mean, I'll let Will take the kind of the analyst hat answer on that. But I also just thought, Schultze, that look at Dylan Gabriel tonight, 21 of 25 for 290. Like, they kind of could do whatever they wanted to in the air, and so it didn't seem like they had to get super exotic with the run, and they were able to – it felt like they were maybe able to pass first, run second. I don't know, Will, what you saw kind of in their run game, at least early on, and as far as Whittington freeing things up.
I felt like early on Jordan James ran the ball fairly well. Some of it too, you have to be willing to take the 2 and 3 yard plays. Like when you run the football, that just happens, right? Like you beat teams up. There's a reason why they always say tackling Derrick Henry is really hard in the first and second quarter. It's impossible in the third and fourth because he's just beat you up. It's a physicality. It's a mentality. And I think some of it too is like when you look at this offense, they want to pass to set up the run. So the run's always going to be a secondary option. I did like that they started using Dylan Gabriel a little bit more in this. Like, obviously he has a negative number. Well, guess what? He has a negative number because he got sacked.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, continue to use Gabriel in spots, but be smart about how you use him.
Yep.
Put him into the boundary when he's running so that he can run out of bounds really quickly, right? Put him to the short side of the field on his runs.
And we saw that in that red zone run that they had today where he was able to kind of scamper down and tightrope the sideline for a little while and then get out before he had to
sees
take
a
contact.
hit coming, right? And so I just think with this offense, some of it too is like when you're playing an inferior opponent, especially as inferior as Purdue is to you, you just kind of rely on, hey, we're going to get one-on-one matchups for our wide receivers. This might be a chance to throw some of those 50-50 balls so that you get practice doing it, so that when you go up against Ohio State again, if you have to go up against Penn State, look, next week you're going to go play Illinois. That's a pretty darn good defense. You're going to play a cornerback in 2 weeks against Michigan that they're talking about him being a top 10 pick, possibly top 5 in Will Johnson over there. So sometimes when you have a Purdue game, hey, we're running the ball a certain way. Could we run the ball more and just win this game ground and pound? Yes. But we're going to throw the ball because we need to get practice looking at this route versus this defense or vice versa.
And since we're on the topic of running backs, and this comes up in the YouTube chat, you can follow us, like and subscribe at 1080 The Fan on YouTube. We are live there right now. Also reach us on the Vancouver Ford text line, 503-864-6326. But this from Jordan saying, I did not think that Noah looked good. He doesn't have that explosion that I think the other two backs behind him seem like they have. Give me more Lamar and Harris. And while I'm not willing to rule off Whittington just yet, I think maybe some of the explosiveness is still coming back. We got 10 touches for Lamar and Harris tonight, and definitely the longest look we've gotten at Harris with 7 carries for 32 yards. What did you see from both of those guys? And if they're able, or if you need to call on them more during the season, or if you're able to scheme up a couple plays for them, what did you see out of both backs?
I wouldn't be worried about either one of them. To me, Lamar has gigantic big playability. Like, he's already had one touchdown this year that he took on a screen pass where he was just gone.
Yep, that was a Civil War, right?
Right. So my thing with Lamar, to me, it feels like I'd like to see him more in the return game, kick returns, punt returns, stuff like that. I mean, Tez has been great in punt returns. But Lamar seems to have the vision that you need and the big play explosiveness. My assumption is if they're not using him right now, it's got a little something to do with pass pro or knowing his assignment all the time. Usually when you have a bunch of guys who can be explosive in that running back room, it just depends on who is the best blocker. And I think Jordan James showed against Ohio State that blitz pickup that he had where the linebacker has 10-yard head start running head down right into his face. And Jordan James puts him right on his butt, and it allows Gabriel to step into a throw that ended up being a big first down. I think that shows you why Jordan James is getting the most amount of run and not why Lamar or Harris are. But also remember, Lamar is young, and Harris has only been in the system since, the spring?
Yeah, they're new, and it's I think
Harris runs hard.
It's good to see them get run here and to feel like you have something if you need to call on them.
I also think that when you watch Harris and Lamar play, think about it a year or two from now. Right? Like, because James has another, I mean, technically he can come out this year, but I believe he has another year still left. Noah Whittington, I believe, also could take another year depending on his medical. When you look at Harris and Lamar, they're setting up to me to be your thunder and your lightning in about a year or two. Like, Lamar at any moment has got that Reggie Bush explosiveness where he can just go. And so it's just going to be about improving his vision behind that offensive line so that he sees where the holes are, where they're going to open up, and he can hit stuff and just be gone. But then when you watch Harris run, he runs mean. It's physical. He wants to find the linebackers. Like, he's the type of running back where he would have 10 yards easy to the end zone. He'd stop, cut, just so he could run over the linebacker to get into the end zone. Like, he's a crazy guy like that. I like what they're building. And so for me, when I watch them, it's not about what are they going to do for us or do for Oregon this year, because hopefully you don't need them as much this year, but it's what are they going to do for you in 1 or 2 years. And I like what you have building because it's always about what is next.
We will talk a little bit more about the offense, and you started to get into something a little bit earlier, Will, that I want to dive back into, and that's I guess I'm trying to think of the right word for it, the emergence of Evan Stewart, and seemingly now having two real serious outside threats on this football team, what that means for Dylan Gabriel, Will Stein, and the rest of the offense coming up. But first, we'll toss it back over to Schulte, who has the Ducks game day weather, brought to you every 10 minutes by Victor Rico's Mexican Food. Order Victor Rico's for your game day celebration in-store or online for pickup or delivery at victorricos.com.
Thank you, Buck. 55 in Portland. The Ducks postgame forecast calls for a low of 43. Tomorrow, some clouds and a high of 70. It'll be 50 with a chance of rain when Oregon hosts Illinois next weekend.
We're back with a complete recap of today's game.
Dylan under center. Turn. Give it to James. He will power his way. No call yet. Touchdown, Jordan James. Both linesmen came in from each side and waited to make that call.
With the coaches and players you want to hear, your feedback on the contest, scores and highlights from across the country, and analysis from your game day crew. This is the Ducks Postgame Scoreboard Show on 1080 The Fan. Oregon Ducks football on 1080 The Fan is brought to you by Coors Light, Pacific Office Automation, Mods BDS, Victor Rico's Mexican Food, Legends Casino Hotel in Toppenish, by Zoom Care, Bellagio's Pizza, Multnomah County Behavioral Health Division, Audi Wilsonville, Laurelhurst Market, by Unitas Community Credit Union, and by Langdon Farms Golf Club. Now, here are your hosts, Ryan Buckley and Will Ortner. The Ducks Postgame Scoreboard Show on 1080 The Fan.
Welcome back into the Pacific Office Automation post-game scoreboard show. The Ducks, winners tonight, 35-0. They bludgeoned the Boilermakers. No Spoilermakers tonight.
Purdue.
Yeah, go have your, cry into your beers at
house.
B-Dubs. I don't know if you guys heard that story this week.
Wait, what?
That's the only bar out there, isn't it?
Well,
That's the spot.
One of Isaac's buddies went to the game in West Lafayette, which was a double overtime thriller when the Ducks played there in 2008. But he said that he got an Uber driver there, and he's like, where should I go to eat? And he's like, oh, dude, I've got this great spot for you. It's called B-Dubs. And he was dead serious.
Buffalo.
And he dropped him off at Buffalo Wild Wings. And he's like, this is the best you've got? He's like, oh, dude, it's everyone's favorite. And so then Suk looked it up on the show. #1 restaurant in West Lafayette, Indiana.
B-Dubs.
Buffalo Wild Wings.
It's still B-Dubs.
#4, Applebee's.
Yes.
I am not surprised.
Eating fancy.
I no kidding. I had a buddy that went to school in the Midwest in Illinois, and that's not too far from Indiana, right? That sounds right in there because we were at B-Dubs every night.
They don't you're a college town.
Yeah,
You got to have a bar. Come on, man.
And it is a big bar with cheap eats, right?
Yeah, but that's not what I mean. You need a grimy college bar where it's
With
$1
dollar shots.
Thursdays,
Oh, for sure.
$1 beer Thursdays,
Free lady
thirsty
entry.
Thursdays.
Well, you also just need, even in a college town, you need a place. I mean, I don't even know that it's there anymore, but when I was in college, you had the Oregon Electric Station. There's the steakhouse that was in Eugene.
Yes.
It was really great. That's where you took recruits on their official
It's a throwback,
visits
yeah.
out to dinner or whatever.
the Ellensburg Pasta Company, that was the spot, man.
There you go.
Go to the Tav, get a hungry mother. Let's go.
Boy, back in the day now. Okay. Let's try to get this thing back on the rails. I was going to save this conversation for later, but as I was doing my research in the break here, I feel like it's something that we need to hop into now. Another fantastic night for Dylan Gabriel. Yeah, he had the pick where he overthrew a receiver, but that looked like more of one of the ones where the ball just kind of got away from him as opposed to making a bad decision in a bad spot. Those will happen. You're fine with that, especially when it's part of a 21 for 25, 84% performance with a couple more touchdowns and another nice rushing performance. But I went to pull this up because I wanted to have this conversation later, but don't look now. Dylan Gabriel now plus 260 for the Heisman Trophy. Ashton Jeanty plus 230. Those odds are shortening between the two of them, or they're getting closer. I've been fascinated by this race this year because of the fact it feels like the people that are all in the top are there for different reasons. Jeanty seems like he is the most physically dominant at his position.
He's the best player.
Period. But then you also have Travis Hunter and what he's doing playing on both sides of the ball. And then you get into the very typical best quarterback for the best team in the country type deal. And I'm a little bit surprised Ewers isn't higher, but I know he's missed two games, and somebody said that there hasn't been a Heisman Trophy winner who's missed 2 or more games. I don't know if that's actually accurate, but I'll be fascinated to see how these things fluctuate for the rest of the way. 'Cause it feels like Genty has to continue or keep putting up video game numbers. Gabriel, if he stays the course, I don't know. If it felt like tonight was kind of a level night for him because of the fact it's on the heels of this great game that he had against Ohio State. Maybe it wouldn't boost him, but here I am looking at it and creeping a little bit closer to Genty.
Yeah, I think Gabriel is going to continue to keep. He's going to creep closer to Genty unless Genty just decides, like, I'm going to average 300 the rest of the way.
Do you think Gabriel flips him at some point?
I think there's an opportunity, yes, because look at what you have to do left. You're going to go and play Illinois. Illinois has a really good defense, and you're going to be the main game on CBS, so people are going to get national exposure. You're going to play Michigan. Whether Michigan is ranked at that moment or not, I mean, that's going to depend on what they do against Illinois. You're going to get a lot of eyeballs on that game just simply because you're playing Michigan. You're also playing Michigan on the road. You're going to go to Wisconsin, who I think that Fickle might have gotten the dairy raid figured out a little bit. I mean Locke kind of looks good, or Lockie, whatever you say.
Van Dimes goes down, and I thought that they were going to be cooked.
Van Dimes sucks.
Well, but whether or not he sucks, you lose your starting quarterback that early, and you think, oh, this is going to be a
you're
problem.
In trouble. But
they've got it going a little
bit.
bit.
The backup's been pretty good. The defense looks all right. And then you're going to play UW. That's a rivalry game. That's going to be a tough one. You're going to get eyeballs. And then, look, if you take care of business and you do what you're supposed to do, you're either going to go against Ohio State again or you're going to go against Penn State. And the voters are going to love that when you look at this Boise State team. Genty's going to get UNLV, and that's about it. So he has to continue to I think he has to break Barry Sanders' record to get the respect that it's going to take for him to get the win. And then he's going to need Quinn Ewers to have a couple bad games in big moments. Texas might not have to lose the whole thing, but you're telling me right now if Quinn Ewers comes out and throws for 400 and 5 touchdowns against Georgia tomorrow, that he doesn't vault into that race? Like, that's what happened with Milroe. That's what happened with Dylan Gabriel. If Dylan Gabriel goes out and he just dominates Illinois for 400 and a couple touchdowns, and he does the same thing to Michigan, he is going to continue to move forward. So I think that Gabriel, as long as Oregon keeps winning and they keep taking care of business, and he keeps looking like some version of what he has been right now, super efficient, he's got to start taking care of the football a little bit better, but then is able to add in his running game as well. I think that Dylan Gabriel is going to be in it because he's the best quarterback on the best team or the second best team.
Yeah, I would say that Cam Ward's probably his closest competition. I think him, maybe Curtis Rourke were floating from Indiana kind of up and down with him through the Heisman rankings. Jalen Milroe was a little bit higher. I even saw like the kid from Army getting some votes, which kind of surprises me. So I think that alone tells me that Dylan Gabriel has a really good shot at this. But I know he got injured recently, but I am still worried about Travis Hunter being in that conversation. He is just so good, and this year I'm not thinking a quarterback will win it because of how good Genty and Hunter have been.
Just to give you guys a snapshot of the board out there, there are 7 players with odds 1,500 or shorter. You've got Ashton Genty plus 230, Dylan Gabriel plus 260, Travis Hunter 6-1 plus 600, Cam Ward plus 650, then Jalen Milroe 14-1, and then Quinn Ewers and Carson Beck 15-1. Like if Carson Beck goes into Austin tomorrow and throws 4 touchdowns and beats Texas, his odds are catapulting tomorrow.
100%.
So this is
Milroe has a spot.
100%. Yeah, if he goes and carves up Tennessee in Neyland Stadium, he's going to jump up against
Nico has a spot. There's so many big games that are still left on the table that there's a lot of guys that have a shot, and Dylan Gabriel is one of them. And it's because he's played well, but it's also because his team as a whole have played well.
Absolutely. Too. Now, aside from the awards and the odds that go with them, I want to talk to you just about Gabriel and the way that he's throwing the football, because I feel like throughout this season, maybe the knock on him has been that his passing hasn't been perfect. Some people have said that his arm isn't big enough. I know that when he turned in or wanted to get back his scouting grades. I listened to on the broadcast tonight them say that he was disappointed and frustrated with what they said about him. And then the analysts tonight were talking about the way the ball was just jumping out of his hand, both in warmups and on the field tonight. What do you notice about him as a thrower? Not necessarily at the next level, but what makes him dangerous as a quarterback? What makes him good? What makes him a Heisman caliber quarterback here for the Ducks?
The irony is, like, he has all these interceptions, right? He has 4 or 5 on the year, whatever the number is. The 4 that stick out to me are in, the last 4 games or so, 5 games. He actually makes pretty good decisions with the football.
As evidenced by his 80-ish% passing
right,
completion percentage.
Right.
Yeah.
So aside from his interceptions, have you seen him make throws where you're like, what are you doing? Like, where is that one going to? Or that guy was wide open. How do you miss that? Or if he does miss someone that is wide open, it's because, well, that's like the last guy on his read, and so he's never going to get there. It feels like he's starting to go through his progressions a lot better. He's taking more chances because he's getting more trust in Evan Stewart. Evan Stewart really seems to be on the Tez Johnson path of last year.
Bingo.
Where it's just like...
You've been saying this is coming, and I've kind of been monitoring it, and I'm like, dude, Will has been onto this. You basically said that the point that you've made that I think is so astute, that last year you had Troy Franklin, who was like Biletnikoff caliber.
Yeah, he's the dude.
Receiver, and you get Tez Johnson in, who you've also heard great things about, and you're like, well, this guy should be awesome too. And you're like, wait a second, I thought this guy was going to be a little bit more awesome than that. And it took you until about halfway through the season to get, I think, maybe the chemistry with the quarterback, to get comfort in the system, and now all of a sudden you have 2 monsters, and that might be the bridge we're crossing now with Evan Stewart.
Right. Well, and I really think they get to play the true role that they were destined for, where Evan Stewart is your true big play guy, and Tez Johnson gets to be your short down
possession guy.
Yes, because Evan Stewart, that speed, there's just so few guys that have it. Where like Tez, I'm not saying Tez isn't fast. Tez is incredibly fast, but Tez's acceleration and his quickness off the line, that's where he really can make his leaps, and that's where you see his big plays come from. But going back to Dillon Gabriel, they always say that he has a weak arm. I don't know a quarterback right now that's throwing a better or a prettier deep ball than what he's doing. Like, he just puts the ball. It's almost Russell Wilson circa 2017, 18.
And so that's just it. I think that sometimes people mistake. I understand the need to have a big arm to throw the 60-yard bomb and to thread a ridiculously tight needle, but I don't think you need a big arm to throw a great deep ball.
Right.
And Dillon Gabriel is now showing us, after some reps with these guys, he missed. I keep thinking back to the Boise game where he could have really put the game away with a couple deep shots of guys that he had open. Feels like ever since then he has hit whatever he has wanted to over the top, and it's because he's got so much he's got just the right amount of finesse and air under the ball that it seems like
it's a moonshot.
But it's got enough juice that he's not making his receiver slow down either. But he's also giving him enough opportunity to adjust, and it seems nearly perfect from a deep ball perspective.
Right, they run underneath it, they run to it. It's Russell Wilson again. It's a short quarterback having to adjust how they throw their ball because they're not Josh Allen. They can't see over the line quite as well. They don't have the angle because they're shorter. They're not as tall. So you have to figure out a way to throw it. And I know that kind of affects him when it comes to tight windows, over the middle of the field. But guess what? You don't really have to do that because it's college. How often is that throw a necessity? And yeah, I think that's why you see some struggles when it comes to his red zone passing. But guess what you start doing now? You use him in the +1 run game. So then teams have to account for him with a spy. It opens everything up with his passing game. So I think some of it early on, some of the struggles might have been because they were holding stuff back for Ohio State. And now you're not going to see some of those struggles because there's no reason to hold anything back. Who are you holding it back for? Illinois, Michigan? It's already been on the table. You've already shown it against Ohio State. You might hide a specific look or start going through specific tendencies that you're going to use and trick teams with a move away from that tendency. But right now, there's no reason to do that. Just go and find ways to win.
Well, it seems like he has the total package, whereas he's making all the throws. He's in the right mental space where he's making the high percentage decisions, which I think is absolutely crucial. And he's got himself squarely atop or close to the top of the Heisman race. So we're going to continue to monitor just how stellar Dylan Gabriel's season can be. Maybe he's lifting that trophy by the end of it. Certainly the way he's playing, he'll get an invitation to New York. Can he lift it? We'll find out as the season goes on. But something that Dan Lanning has to do every week, even after the wins, makes the team go to the doctor, figure out what's wrong. And as perfect as this night might seem on the scoreboard, 35-0. There are things that can be cleaned up. We'll talk about them next on the Pacific Office Automation postgame scoreboard show. But first, we toss it over to Schulte, who has the Ducks game day weather, brought to you every 10 minutes by Victor Rico's Mexican Food. Order Victor Rico's for your game day celebration in-store or online for pickup or delivery at victorricos.com.
Thank you, Buck. 55 in Portland. The Ducks postgame forecast calling for a low of 43. Tomorrow, some clouds with a high of 70. It's going to be in the 50s with a chance of rain when Oregon hosts Illinois next weekend.
If you're considering new construction and want it done right and fast,
It's a fumble. That was Claire, the tight end, who made the catch.
If it's a catch, it's a fumble, Jerry.
Oregon. Kobe Savage got on the
Middle
ball.
of the field is a reception with a fumble recovered by Oregon. First down.
This is the Pacific Office Automation post-game scoreboard show on the Odyssey app and your home for Ducks football. 1080 The Fan. Pacific Office Automation. Problem solved.
It's a wild one going down in Provo tonight. Shades of Joey Harrington in the Fiesta Bowl as the Cowpokes go ahead with the old quarterback throwback. They get it out to the receiver who throws it back to their quarterback, who's like 29 years old or something like that, Bowman. And
he's older than me, I think.
He gets into the end zone. We have a 28-28 ball game with undefeated BYU still hanging in the balance. So keep an eye on that one. We'll also, coming up a little bit later in the show, talk about some big national games this week. All of this stuff ultimately going to impact the Ducks, assuming they're headed towards a playoff berth. Want to thank you for following us on the YouTube live stream at 1080 The Fan. Also, joining us on the Vancouver Ford text line, 503-864-6326. One thought here from the Vancouver Ford text line says, Oregon was hiding 95% of their offense. Huge shout out to Stewart for trading stats for team success. I don't know how much. I mean, I don't have any idea how deep Will Stein's playbook is, and how much, and how I also don't know, from a football perspective, how vanilla today's play calling was. But it does feel like, with the exception of Ohio State, he's been able to keep most of his tricks in his bag, and a lot of the stuff that he's able to run with his team is just we like our guys better than your guys, and we can run the basic stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a talent disparity. I mean, like, there's a reason why you recruit at the way you do so that you can have these games where you don't have to get into your bag. Because, look, when you get into the playoffs, you're probably going to have to get into your bag a little bit, and you're going to have to do it week in and week out. And I like how everyone comes in and talks about, well, how deep is the playbook? How deep is it? How deep is it? All Will Stein does, like, even when he's like at home, like having dinner with his family, he's a football guy. He's probably thinking about different ways that he can beat the Illinois defense. And that's
matchup scheme.
It's not
how
an
can
attack.
I get this guy?
People who are successful in anything, like if you're successful in business, guess what? You're at dinner with your wife and your kids, and you're like, I can't wait to get back to the office tomorrow. Like, that's just kind of how those people are.
Or you're having the
wired.
conversation about, like, well, you know, what we need on the grocery list, and you're going, and you're like, what do I do against zone coverage when I have the ball in 3rd and long?
Right.
You know, you're
like that's just what you do, right? And especially for football coaches, because it's the fall, it's go time, it's now. You can think about, I'm so excited to be at dinner with my wife and kids in the spring. That's what the spring and winter are for. Like, look, I'll tell you right now, there have probably been times where Coach Lanning is like going home and like his kid messed up, did something they didn't want to do, and he's like, I could be on the recruiting trail right now.
Probably.
This would be so much better for my time. But what I'm going to say here is, when it comes to playbooks, most teams put in schemes and concepts, and then each week you look at the team that you're playing against and how can we use these concepts or these formations or these schemes with our personnel and set our personnel up in the best spot to attack the weaknesses of the other team. So when I was in college, we never had a playbook that was handed to me. You just went in each week, and the coaches on Monday would say, these are the plays that we like versus these looks, and this is how we want it run. And so you go in and you drop all the plays in your playbook, and you know how we want to attack this and how we want to attack that. And then you go out on Tuesday and you run everything. And some things work and some things don't. And you come back and, okay, we're going to tweak this, we're going to tweak that. And then Wednesday you go out and everything looks a lot cleaner. And then on Thursday is your final run through. And then that's when the coaches go, okay, so we thought we liked this concept, but maybe our players can't get there this week and they just don't have it. So dive concept is out this week. We're going to run more mid zone. Hey, we really like the flood concept and our players have shown this, but we think that if we put Tez in the slot, it's going to get him matched up against the safety, and that's a better matchup for us. So this week, instead of having Tez on the outside at the X, we're going to have him at the H inside. And so a lot of times people will say, well, how deep into the playbook is he getting? He's not really getting deep into the playbook. It's what is he able to design in concepts that these players already know and that they already use week in and week out.
How do you almost forge a different path to get the same success?
Right, because look, there's only so many ways to run the football. There's only so many ways to throw the football. But what you do is you set your players up in different positions, or you get different looks or different formations to scheme your players up to get the best one-on-one matchup. And then defensively, you're doing the same thing. Hey, Oregon likes to run the flood concept. Well, they like to throw to their second option here in the middle. They don't want to throw deep because a flood, you have a deep player, you have a middle player, you have a short player. Hey, they like to throw the middle. So guess what? We're going to set our best cover guy. We're going to make sure that he's dropping into a zone in here. Or, hey, we think we have a guy that's fast enough to cover Evan Stewart. He's going to shadow Evan all game. And as long as he doesn't give up the deep ball, it's a victory for us. So when it comes to talking about playbooks, everyone has the same concepts. Everybody has the same schemes for the most part based on what you run. It's what can you design that week that you can get your players to understand and execute at a high level.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. Every week I watch the Ducks versus Them video segment that the Ducks video team puts out, and the recap from Ohio State was like 20 minutes long because there was so much good stuff in there. But there was really great stuff from the coaches' meetings and from the offensive meetings leading up to the Ohio State game. And Lanning kept preaching during the coaches' meetings, I want to think players, not plays. And what he's not saying is that scheme doesn't matter, but he's like, let's work backwards. Let's figure out how we want to score and with who, and then figure out how we're going to make that happen. And he goes, when we're in a tight spot, what do I want? I want Jordan James running behind Josh Connerly. How do we make that happen? What's the best way for us to do that? And now you have just this wealth of talent and an embarrassment of riches. And so you can ask, so I feel like Will Stein's sitting there playing whack-a-mole with how do I get Evan Stewart the ball? How do I get Tez Johnson?
100%.
And having that ability, there's just all these permutations that you get to go through. And maybe to your point, it's less about the playbook and how do I find the best ways to give these guys the matchup nightmares that they always create.
Oh, yeah. Well, the part that will always blow my mind is how much time is spent doing just drawing up plays and drawing up ideas. But at the end of the day, like I played D2 football. Guess what? My offensive coordinator, he's on the staff at Oregon. So I kind of have an idea of what's going on offensively and special teams because it's like, oh yeah, I remember those plays when that coach drew them up for our team. He was guess what his main mantra was? Players over plays. That was his big thing. He wanted to find matchup nightmares that he could get his players the ball in. And what certain coaches are able to do where, hey, we're going to drop this formation into this look, into this down and distance, and this is the defense that they'll come out in, and then we'll hit a big play here. And you think that, oh, well, they only do that for the big trick plays. No. They do that for every play. And how they can match it up wise and how did it look on film? Do we like how it looks on film? Because sometimes you go out there and practice and you might think that, hey, we can run this mid-zone concept into the boundary versus this look, and you get to your players and the scout team players are just working your offensive linemen. It's not because your offensive linemen are weak. It's just that's a bad matchup for what that offensive line possesses. So now you have to figure out what does that offensive line possess skill-wise. So how can we use their skills to their advantages and hide their weaknesses as best as we can. So the more and more that you just go into the real football nerd stuff, and I can nerd out here for the next 3 hours, like I'll just sit here and talk about formation into boundary versus this or unbalanced versus that.
I'll nerd out with you for the next 30 minutes or so. And
then I understand that. I got to go pick up a car.
Nice.
But what I'm saying is it's very clear from what Oregon has shown over the last 2 years is that defensively and offensively, you have two coordinators that are some of the best at scheming up their players' strengths to attack the weaknesses of the defenses that they are facing. The reason that Evan Stewart had a gigantic game against Ohio State is because they looked at Ohio State and they said, if we can get him matched up with Burke, that is a mismatch that we can take advantage of because he is weak getting out of his back pedal and keeping up with a guy that has the speed of Evan Stewart. And that's why Evan Stewart had a big game.
And Purdue couldn't even contain them without Terrence Ferguson and without Trayshawn Holden for the Ducks. Think about that. They weren't even at full strength on the offensive.
That's exactly right. Your number
core.
number one tight end and probably your number 3 wide receiver, both missing from the game.
Third and fourth options.
Don't miss a beat, and the guys filling in for him looked like they absolutely belonged. They absolutely looked the part. So we know Dan Lanning and company like to go to the doctor even after the wins. We will save that for a little bit later in the show, but coming up next, it's time for our Bellagio's Pizza very best player of the game. But first, we'll toss it over to Schultze, who has the Ducks game day weather brought to you every 10 minutes by Victorico's Mexican Food. Order Victorico's for your game day celebration in-store or online for pickup or delivery at victoricos.com.
Appreciate that, Buck. 54 in Portland right now. The Ducks postgame forecast calling for a low of 43. Tomorrow, some clouds, but a high of 70. It'll be in the 50s with a chance of rain when Oregon hosts Illinois next weekend.
Duck fans, game day is here, and you need fuel to cheer on Oregon. Hey, it's Dusty, and at Victorico's Mexican Food, we know the game doesn't wait, so neither should you. Swing by before kickoff.
action. This is the Pacific Office Automation Postgame Scoreboard Show on 1080 The Fan.
Throws, end zone, caught, touchdown. Trayshawn Holden with his 7th touchdown reception of the year.
It's time for the Bellagio's Pizza Very Best Player of the Game. Pay attention. Our expert panel will select the very best player of the game. And when you hear the text to win cue in the noon hour of Monday's Danny and Dusty Show, you could win a free pizza from Bellagio's.
Welcome back to the Pacific Office Automation Postgame Scoreboard Show, where Will Ortner is lamenting to me that
I'm not at all.
things are bad when they're actually good. They are not bad. They are
not
good.
True.
The Oregon Ducks winners, number 2 in the country,
Well, that
improves
is
to
true.
7-0, 35-0. The Ducks thump the Boilermakers in West Lafayette.
The
and
Ducks
now,
are not bad.
No, and
They're very good.
There are a number of candidates this week, as there have been many weeks. But now it's time for Will to tell us who is the Bellagio's Pizza very best player of the game. But before we do, remember who Will's very best player of the game is. And when you hear the cue to call during the noon hour of Monday's Danny and Dusty, you could win the free delicious pizza from Bellagio's. So without further ado, Will, who is the Bellagio's very best player of the game?
This was the most difficult game for me to pick because you start going down the list and it's like, well, Dylan Gabriel has a pretty good game, but he's gotten it the last couple weeks and he's performed better than what he did today. And it's like, well, maybe I give it to Jordan James. I don't know if I've given it to Jordan James, but it's like, well, he only had 10 carries, 50 yards, 2 touchdowns. Like, that's pretty good, but it wasn't like he dominated. You start going through, it's like, well, Evan Stewart, he had a big receiving game, but he didn't have a touchdown. And so then I realized I can really go wild here. And I can finally go and get a player some true love that I don't know if I'm going to be able to give them a Bellagio's player of the game. Okay, and the other fun thing about this is Jeff Rust having fun trying to figure out which person spelled this name correctly.
Ooh.
Because I'm going Tatum Tuioti.
Uh-huh.
That dude has been the unsung hero of that defense because guys like Harmon and Birch and Bossa and Betcher, they get a lot of love because they've been getting a lot of stats. And Tuioti, it feels like every third game is where he gets his big stat game, and this game just happened to be that. But he is a game wrecker always. He doesn't always come up with the tackles because he's the one that forces the quarterback right into Jordan Birch or right into Mateo Uyunglele.
It's easy for the players who make that kind of impact to see their stats get lost in the shuffle. And tonight
they shouldn't.
And tonight he did both. He lit up on the stat sheet and he did all the things that he usually does.
6 total tackles. 5 of them are solo. He has a sack and he has a TFL. He's flying all over the field. What they're asking him to do at that outside linebacker position is not only rush the passer, but also play great in coverage. He did a great job because what Purdue likes to do is run east and west. They want to stretch the field. They want to see if they can get the edge. Well, guess who's setting the edge? Tatum Tuioti, and he didn't allow it to happen. He also got into the backfield, and that allowed for a couple other big tackles for loss for Jackson, for Betcher, for Uyunglele as well. He also disrupted some passes. I just felt like Tatum Tuioti, he's had one of the more disruptive seasons that we've seen at Oregon, while at the same time not always getting all of the glory. He finally has a game where he gets a bunch of stats and no one else is like, wow, you blew my socks off. So I can finally get some love to Tatum Tuioti, and he deserves it. What he does for that defense will just not get the love because he doesn't get the true stats, but he's always creating havoc.
And as Will alluded to, a unique spelling for Tatum Tuioti.
Yeah,
so
have fun with that.
That will help.
True.
Let me tell you, if there are a bunch of people texting in, make sure you got that part dialed in. That will up your chances greatly. Yeah, well, you don't need to tell them. Let them do their own research. But
don't help them out.
But Tatum
Just want people
Tuioti.
to win.
Well,
Great
somebody will win.
Great pizza.
The very best pizza winner should be the very best speller of Tatum Tuioti.
This week, yes, it should be.
The very best player of the game is Tatum Tuioti. Remember him when you hear the text to win cue in the noon hour of Monday's Danny and Dusty. Monday's Dunny and Dusty. It's going all off the rails now. But you can win that free delicious pizza from Bellagio's. Coming up next, what are the Ducks going to find when they go to the doctor this week? Plus postgame from Dan Lanning with Dusty Hare. We'll get to that next. But first, Schultze has the Ducks game day weather brought to you every 10 minutes by Victor Rico's Mexican Food. Order Victor Rico's for your game day celebration in-store or online. Pick up or delivery at victorricos.com.
Thanks, Buck. 55 still in Portland. The Ducks postgame forecast calling for a low of 43 tomorrow. Clouds, but a high of 70. It'll be in the 50s with a chance of rain when Oregon hosts Illinois next Saturday.
Football season is back, and that means Ducks game day.
He made the grab. Is that a touchdown? Yes, it is! What a catch.
This is the Pacific Office Automation post-game scoreboard show on the Odyssey app and your home for Ducks football. 1080 The Fan. Pacific Office Automation. Problem solved.
Welcome back to the Pacific Office Automation post-game scoreboard show. The Ducks winners, once again, they improved to 7-0. They are number 2 in the country. They could always move up to number 1, considering number 1 Texas has their hands full this weekend hosting Georgia. Going to get to this weekend's top 25 slate coming up next. But before we do, Dan Lanning always talks about this in his post-game press conferences. The team is going to have to go to the doctor. Even after wins, you go to the doctor, you figure out what's wrong, and you get right. Before we get to all that, though, I know that Schultze has this clip for us. Dusty Harrow was able to meet with Dan Lanning after the game, and here's what the coach had to say after the 35-0 win over Purdue.
Coach, first road shutout for the Oregon Ducks since 1992. Assess your defense's performance in this one.
I think we showed what we're capable of, and I still watch that game and I say, man, there's so much improvement for us out there, so many places we can be better, and I know we're going to go attack it.
You know, between that second quarter and into the third quarter, it seemed like there was a little bit of a lull on both sides of the football. What was the message to kind of jumpstart things again in that fourth quarter?
Just that we're not going to change who we need to be for us to be the type of team we want to be, right? Let's go put it on the field. Let's go show on the field. I thought our guys were able to do that. We wanted to establish the run in the second half. I thought we were able to do that. But there's going to be a lot of things we can look at that we can say, hey, we can get better at. We're going to play some really good teams moving forward. For us to be the team we want to be, we got to be able to do that.
Can we get to a little bit of that good in that first quarter, though? The first 3 drives of the game, your offense looked like they were firing on all cylinders. You had to be happy with them coming out being sharp out of the gate.
Yeah, we talked about starting fast. You know, we know obviously teams have struggled traveling to be successful. We felt like we wanted to create some momentum. You know, there's a reason being able to take the ball there early in the game. I thought that was a place that we could do that. And to go to score the first 3 drives certainly helped us.
Young guys, we saw a lot of contributions from young guys in that fourth quarter. What popped out to you from guys like Jeremiah McClellan and Jay Harris? And then on the defensive side of the ball, a big pick by Cam Alexander.
Yeah, a lot of guys being ready for their moment, right? Those guys practice so hard. Our team isn't our team without those guys on our team. And for them to be able to step up when their number was called is huge.
As you guys sit there, and now you're going to go to the doctor on Saturday. Is it a Saturday visit to the doctor?
We'll get to the doctor a little bit quicker for sure.
And then you got a big game against Illinois coming up in Autzen Stadium again. It's got to be nice to be back in the friendly confines after a short week.
Yeah, I'm counting on our crowd to bring it again like they did last time we were in Autzen.
We got a long flight home, Coach, so I'm going to let you get to it. Congratulations on 35-0 win.
Thank you. Have a good one.
That was Dusty Harrow with head coach Dan Lanning right after the game, and he always references it. Going to the doctor, you're going to do it early this week. From what we saw today, Will, what are the things that you think this coaching staff will be wanting to either fix, work on, improve on? Where are there areas for improvement, at least based on what we saw tonight?
Look, you need to improve on the turnovers. I understand that this one wasn't as egregious as the earlier ones, right? You're not in the red zone. It wasn't a bad decision. It just felt like sometimes when you take a risk on a 50-50 ball, the other team makes a good play too. You gotta knock down those turnovers. They can't happen. They can't happen the way that they do. I don't love the third quarter. It feels kind of the same way that UCLA did when you were on the road, where it's like, we're up big, this thing's over, get us out of here. You need to convert more there. If you can score a touchdown on that first drive of the third quarter or second drive, now you're up 28, and now you can really start getting into your bag of getting players who don't normally get a lot of playing time in. I just feel like last year you used to dominate that middle 8, and right now, best case scenario for you, you're like kind of shadow boxing the middle 8. Maybe the middle 8 is kind of punching you in the face a little bit. You need to start doing better in the third quarter and at the end of the second quarter, because right now it feels like that's a missed opportunity to make really big gains in certain games.
Definitely. One of the things that we noted today that was that did not need to be shored up, that was excellent, and we'll revisit it again today in our Ducks Game Day Secret Score.
Ducks Game Day Secret Score.
The Ducks Game Day Secret Score is 93. That is the number of passing yards that the Ducks pass defense allowed today to Purdue. Just 93 yards through the air for new quarterback Ryan Brown and the Purdue Boilermakers. The pass defense was stellar. Maybe this is nitpicking, Will, and you tell me, but I look at what Purdue did running the ball. 40 carries, 208 yards, 5.2 yards a carry. I'm not about to sit here and say Oregon's running defense or run defense doesn't have it or wasn't up to the task, and maybe they were just keeping everything in front of them. The other team didn't make it into the freaking end zone, so it's not like they had a bad game. But are there issues with not issues? Are there things you can do better there, run defense wise?
Yeah, I wish I had more of a breakdown on.
And it's early.
Each quarter.
We can get back to this on Monday, too.
Right. Like, I'd like more of a breakdown on each quarter. Specifically, like, if you're giving up, you gave up, 208 yards on the ground. Also, all Purdue did was run the football. It wasn't like Purdue ran the football because they had success.
40 carries to 19 pass attempts.
They knew they couldn't throw, so they knew that their best chance of winning. They were running the ball when they were down by 21. Yeah. It was just like, this is what we
They were running
do.
the ball down 35.
Like, this is all they could do. They knew that they had to run the ball. So some of that is when you get a bunch of touches like that, you're naturally going to have a higher number. I would be interested to see what it looked like in the first and second quarter versus what it looked like in the third and fourth. Because I remember right around the end of the first half, I was listening to Jerry and Jorgie, and they were saying that Purdue barely had 100 yards of total offense. So when I hear that, I'm all ecstatic. It's like, hey, when you needed your best effort, you came out hot and you really shut them down. And now as you start putting in the 2s and the 3s and they leave their 1s out there, now are they starting to have some success? So I'd really need to look more at the numbers on that one based on when those yards came, because they were moving the ball, but they were also moving the ball in the fourth quarter when you had your 2s and 3s.
To give you that information, 93 yards of those 200 were in the fourth quarter, Will. So good point there.
Boom.
And then
Look at that. That's analysis and teamwork, boys.
I want to add to that. I think that you would both agree that there were missed tackles by a lot of Ducks through the first 3 quarters as well, and they lost the battle at the line of scrimmage where it looked like they had their running back kind of wrapped up, and then he bounces off and he goes for 4 or 5 more. I felt like that happened at least 4 or 5 times today, and that's something Oregon needs to work on going forward.
They will have an extra day to get tuned up for Illinois before they come to Autzen Stadium. We do have kickoff time for next week. It'll be a 12:30 kick on CBS, which means we will start things bright and early here on 1080 The Fan with a 6 a.m. Center and Saint tailgate. But now we turn the page to being football fans the rest of the weekend with the Ducks games in the book. We get to turn to the top 25, and there are some good top 25 matchups this week. We'll get to those coming up next, and before we wrap up the show with our game balls. We'll do that coming up on the Pacific Office Automation Postgame Scoreboard show on 1080 The Fan. But first, Schulte has the Ducks Game Day weather brought to you every 10 minutes by Victoricos Mexican Food. Order Victoricos for your game day celebration in-store or online, pickup or delivery at victoricos.com.
Thank you, Buck. 54 right now in Portland. The Ducks postgame forecast calling for a low of 43. Tomorrow, cloudy with a high of 70. It'll be in the 50s with a chance of rain when Oregon hosts Illinois next Saturday.
Looking for a better primary care experience? Welcome to
Here's a pitch coming left and 10-yard line inside of the 5. Harris will score. Nice blocking on the left-hand side as Jay Harris gets his first touchdown of the year, and the junior celebrates with his teammates, and Oregon makes it a 34-0 ball game.
This is the Pacific Office Automation Postgame Scoreboard Show on the Odyssey app, and your home for Ducks football. 1080 The Fan. Pacific Office Automation. Problem solved.
Well, problem solved indeed. The Ducks had no problem with the Purdue Boilermakers trying to play Spoilermakers this evening. 35-0, the Ducks winners in West Lafayette, Indiana. Oregon trying to make their way home now and beat the fog into Eugene. Dusty Hare, we just heard him there talking to Dan Lanning after the game. I saw an update during the break. Terrence Ferguson's illness, an interesting one. Somewhere between an illness and an injury, he had to have an appendectomy this week. He had to get his appendix out. And as someone who's gone through that, I can tell you it stinks. The pain initially really sucks. It's a pretty simple procedure, but I would not be surprised if he missed next week as well, just depending on how you feel.
I can't wait for some idiot to be like,
he's not tough enough.
I would have played. This is what's wrong
Let
with
it
this
rupture.
generation.
No, this is an emergency. He needs to go to the hospital
Gen
now.
Z is full of a bunch of softies. I would have just taken it out myself and went out there and played.
So, best wishes health-wise to Terrence Ferguson, because even though you got that taken care of and that's good, still stinks to go through. So hopefully he's back on his feet in no time. But now we as Ducks fans, our work for the week is nearly done. We get to look ahead to a pretty stellar weekend. I know that last week was the one that was like really top billed. Of course, you had the Oregon, Ohio State. You had USC, Penn State. There was a bunch going on last weekend, important matchup-wise. But right now, this weekend, there's a lot to like as well. So you have the number 1 team in the land, Texas, hosting number 5, Georgia. I don't know. Is this an elimination game for Georgia?
It puts you into where you can't make a mistake because a 2-loss Georgia team gets
Should
in.
make
so
it.
it's
Yeah.
not it's not an elimination. I'm not though as far as dirt because dirt is like a 3-loss Georgia team automatically gets in. I don't know if I go that far.
Because it depends what the rest of the landscape looks like. But
Exactly. The other thing too is like if there is going to be a team that gets in as a 3-loss team, it would be Georgia or Alabama. Georgia's schedule is brutal. Like they have Texas, they still have to play Tennessee, and I want to say, as I try to find them on here,
I got it right here. So it's
I want
at
to say
Texas
they have to play
versus Florida.
Ole Miss still.
They're at Ole Miss.
They've
So basically this week is at Texas, then they're home against Florida, at Ole Miss versus Tennessee, and then you finish with UMass and Georgia Tech. So whatever. But that stretch there,
it's not easy.
3 out of 4
man.
games are Texas, Ole Miss, and Tennessee. That's you got your work cut out for you there. So
you lose your Alabama game and you lose your Texas game early. That's a lot. And Florida, doesn't Florida feel like as bad as they are, they're going to beat somebody?
Yes, I would agree.
They're in a bunch of these games. Now they have to go to the young kid who is very electric. He makes a lot of dumb mistakes, but he also can make a lot of plays that other people can't. Georgia Tech isn't even that bad. That's a tough schedule. I don't know that a 2-loss, you're instantly, there'll be 2 losses all the way through. There might be 3 losses on that schedule.
Let's look through a little bit of the rest of the slate and games that could potentially impact or affect Oregon. Someone put it out on Twitter tonight, a revenge game in Louisville tomorrow. Tyler Shuck versus the man who recruited him, Mario Cristobal. The number 6 Miami Hurricanes, 6-0, putting their undefeated record on the line again. 2 weeks in a row, they barely survive. Is this the week they get knocked off, or do they get through this one too?
This is one of my better bets, Big Will Bets. Head on over to BetQL/Odyssey or head over to my Twitter at Will Ortner. I really like Miami in this one because you're coming off a bye, and Louisville isn't great at getting after the passer. Guess what Cam Ward's really good at doing? He's really good at buying time and finding open wide receivers. I think that Miami's going to stop playing with their food. I also thought that they would blow out Cal. And look at what that did to me.
An undefeated Indiana team welcomes in Dominic Raiola, Dylan Raiola. I always say Dominic, that's his dad who played in the NFL. Dylan Raiola and Nebraska, who's 5-1. Signetti has got things rolling at Indiana. I read a stat that they have not allowed a point in the first quarter all season, which is pretty impressive. But who do the Hoosiers stay undefeated through this one?
I want them to just because I like Signetti. Like the fact that he keeps drop in, Google me, I win.
I win, Google me.
Like, that's awesome. And then Rourke has been great for them. Aside from the Maryland game, he hasn't turned the ball over. Guess what? The Maryland game is the only game that's really been close for them. Now, they haven't really played anybody, but I would love for the Indiana Hoosiers to beat Nebraska. And then all of a sudden you're looking at them going back-to-back weeks against Ohio State and Michigan, but by the time they'd play them, I believe they would be at 9 wins. There is a world where there's a 2-loss Indiana team. There's a world, and if they beat Michigan, 1 loss.
Yeah.
And
Michigan,
loss Indiana.
Michigan's not the team that went to the title game last year. We know that.
No, they're good. They're okay.
Some other undefeateds that are in action tomorrow. You have number 23 Army hosting East Carolina. Speaking of undefeateds right now, BYU just allowed Oak State to march down the field and take a 35-31 lead with 1:13 to go. BYU's undefeated season now hanging in the balance with just over a minute to go in that one. Big one in the SEC tomorrow. Some people saying this one could be, based on their schedules, maybe not an elimination game, but close to it. Alabama, 7th in the country, at Tennessee. Alabama has looked a little bit suspect. They've already got the loss to Vandy. It was iffy against South Carolina. Tennessee started off with a bang. Then they have kind of fallen apart. So what do we think about that marquee matchup?
I think that we are going to find out if Heupel can correct Nico's mistakes. Just how good Nico is. Like, does Nico need another offseason to correct his issues? Because right now, when he was looking fantastic, you were going up against weaker teams. Like, you thought the NC State team was, wow, look at how good he played against these guys. And in reality, you kind of realize, hey, that NC State team is really bad. And Oklahoma, you knew you didn't have to score that much. They can run the football well. Now, you just lost your best defensive player in the heart and soul in that Pele guy. He's been fantastic. So losing him is going to be huge. For me, doesn't this just feel like a game that Kalen DeBoer wins? Like, Kalen DeBoer's teams just play to whoever they're playing against. And he finally got snake bitten when they were playing Vanderbilt. But, like, remember UW last year? Every game that they played was within a score, maybe 2. They weren't really blowing anyone out once they get into conference games. This Alabama team is kind of doing the same thing. But if Heupel can get Nico more in sync with his wide receivers, Nico is missing open wide receivers right now.
And you can't do that against a team that's as good as Alabama, I don't think.
And he's making freshman mistakes. But where's the weakness in this Alabama team? Their defensive secondary. That's the perfect spot for Nico to get right, find open wide receivers, and all of a sudden you're looking at Tennessee back into wagon watch, and you're looking at Nico back into Heisman watch if he has a big game. That being said, Milroe could do the same thing, and all of a sudden Milroe's back into Heisman watch. I'm going with Alabama. This feels like a DeBoer game where he wins, but I wouldn't be shocked if we're coming back on Monday and like, well, Alabama might be out in Tennessee. Here they come.
Then at 12:30, I mean, that one was at 12:30. Also at 12:30, I should say, number 24, Michigan, at number 22, Illinois. Obviously, this further down in the rankings, but what will you be looking for considering we're getting two of Oregon's upcoming opponents?
I'm really high on Illinois. I really like Luke Altmaier at quarterback over there. He's dotting up teams and he's not turning the ball over. This Illinois defense,
that kid's got 1,400 yards, 14 touchdowns, and 1 pick.
Yeah, and that's against good opponents. Like, his one downer game is Penn State.
Good defense.
One of the better defenses. And guess what? Their defense held Aller to only 2 touchdowns, right? I think they ended up with a field goal. It ended up being like a 10-point game because I remember that they covered because I had them at like 14 or 15, whatever the number was. This is a good Illinois team. They play traditional Big Ten football where they're going to beat you up, but they have a halfway decent quarterback. Bielema is doing at Illinois exactly what he did at Wisconsin. You have a floor, and your floor is a 6 to 7 win team, and every once in a while, you're going to find a quarterback that doesn't turn the ball over, and that bumps you up to an 8 or 9, or possibly, if everything goes your way and you have a weak schedule, a 10-win team. Watch out for Illinois. They're going to beat someone that they shouldn't, hopefully not the Duckies, but they're going to beat someone that they shouldn't, and it's going to help push them into maybe a playoff conversation.
And then the game that could in theory, help vault Oregon to the #1 spot in the land. 4:30 on ABC. #5 Georgia at #1 Texas. We started to get into this one
Wagon watch.
a little bit earlier, but how do you see it? I know that you said you got in when it was just a 3-point spread for Texas. That thing has crept up a little bit. It's now Texas favored by 5. Ooh. Historically, Sark and Texas really struggle coming off the Red River game. They put a lot of eggs in that basket. But when you're hosting Kirby Smart and this Georgia team, I don't think you're taking anybody lightly.
Also, that Oklahoma game, you didn't need to. You didn't have to. Oklahoma's really, really bad. Defensively, they're pretty good, but offensively, they're horrible. When I look at this Georgia team, they're not as deep as what they've been in the past. They're still dealing with injuries. They don't have their top offensive lineman back yet, I believe. And this Texas team, they just keep getting healthier and healthier. That defense is for real. Their defensive line, they lost 2 big studs in Sweat and Murphy. They just reloaded. Their wide receiver group is deep. They have a freshman wide receiver that the boss here loves, and we're not they're talking about him as possibly being better than the other two, and we haven't even seen him because of how deep that wide receiver core is. They just have dudes on dudes on dudes. I mean, Bolden, the kid who was awesome for years at Oregon State, is their 5th guy.
Yeah.
So when I look at this Texas team, they play great defense, and I think that they could jump out and get a big lead early. And Quinn Ewers has played in a lot of big games like this. He's not going to be shocked.
He's seasoned
early. And if Georgia keeps starting slow, which they've done in every single game this year, and Texas gets up by 14 early, which I think is possible, I think Texas runs away with this one because this isn't a defense like Alabama where Georgia can start slow and get back into it late. So if Georgia doesn't start fast, this is going to be a Texas butt whooping.
It is a great slate tomorrow. We'll get to all of it and potential upset brewing in Provo. We'll see if we get the result of that on the other side of the break as we pick some game balls and we look ahead to that Illinois game next Saturday. You'll listen to the Pacific Office Automation postgame scoreboard show on 1080 The Fan. Here's Schultze with the Ducks Game Day Weather, brought to you every 10 minutes by Victorico's Mexican Food. Order Victorico's for your game day celebration in-store or online for pickup or delivery at victoricos.com.
Thanks, Buck. 54 in Portland. The Ducks postgame forecast calls for a low of 43 tomorrow. Cloudy and a high of 70. It'll be in the 50s with a chance of rain when Oregon hosts Illinois next weekend.
The last thing you want is your furnace to break down when it's cold outside. .com.
2 seconds. 1. There's your final score from West Lafayette, Indiana, the campus of the Purdue Boilermakers. Oregon with their actually second Big Ten, but big road Big Ten win against Purdue. The final 35-0 to shut out the Ducks over the Boilermakers. A lot to like, a lot to see improve, but a great win here on the road.
This is the Pacific Office Automation post-game scoreboard show on the Odyssey app and your home for Ducks football. 1080 The Fan. Pacific Office Automation. Problem solved.
How can you not love college football? Woo! Here we are on a Friday night. Oregon just got done putting a whooping on Purdue at their place. But we're watching the undefeated BYU Cougars led by their quarterback Retzlaff, the BY Jew. Only Jewish starting quarterback in the entire country, starting for the Mormon University. And they were down to their last minute and 13 seconds, down 4 at their own 25. They somehow pull a drive out of the fire, and they go ahead with a go-ahead touchdown with 11 seconds left on the clock. It appears that the BYU Cougars will advance to 7-0 and live to have the undefeated record, live on and fight another day.
How does Oklahoma State let that happen?
Well, I'll tell you what.
Because they suck.
Mike Gundy.
Bad defense.
Mike Gundy got headbutted by one of his cows this week, and I don't know what it knocked loose, but boy, he needed a better defense on that play there. That was a really, really rough drive for the Oklahoma State defense. Maybe you see why they're 3-3 on the season, and BYU is 6-0, soon to be 7-0. But wow, just an amazing moment. Good omen start to the weekend in college football. But fellas, as we wrap this one up here tonight from West Lafayette, let's go around the horn here with a couple game balls. Doesn't have to be someone that we've already talked about. Like, it can be someone that's received accolades already. It can be someone we haven't even touched on. Who's getting it for you tonight, Will?
Well, I already gave one to Tatum Tuioti, so I'm going to give another one to his partner in crime, Mateo Uyunglele. 3 tackles, 3 solos, a sack, 2 tackles for loss. He has just stepped up all year long. Like, last year, you saw flashes of greatness, but at the same time, you have to remind yourself, like, that's an 18-year-old kid going up against 23-year-old men. Like, what is he going to be as he gets older and he keeps building? And he's turned himself into one of the better defensive ends in the country. And it's year 2. Like, you would think that he would look like this later on in his career, like once he's the 22, 23-year-old man. Jordan Birch is hurt, and you need someone to step up. And I know that both him and Tatum Tuioti have done it. But when you're able to do it from that defensive line position, defensive end, against Ohio State, he made a bunch of big third down stops. In this game against Purdue, he gets his sack right away. He's constantly putting pressure on that Purdue offense, whether they're running the football or they're sitting back and passing. This kid, man, if you like O and D line play, you got to just sit back, get some popcorn, and watch him. He's fantastic, and he's only going to get better.
How about you, Schulte? Who's getting a game ball tonight?
I got to go Kenyon Sadiq filling in for Terrence Ferguson. Seriously, Terrence, get well soon. We need your yak. But tonight, thank God, Kenyon Sadiq, only 2 catches, but 58 yards total. And 38 yards of those were yak. And one of those big catches was actually the one without yak, was on that 99-yard drive to start the second quarter for Oregon, scoring a touchdown. So Kenyon Sadiq just kind of filling seamlessly in for Terrence Ferguson today.
And then for me, it's someone we talked about early in this show. Could have been our player of the game today and was not. And while he's still coming back from that knee injury, what a performance from Noah Whittington, and maybe what'll go down as the catch of the season for the Oregon Ducks. Maybe not as significant as some others that we have seen so far this season, but the degree of difficulty, the acrobatic nature of it, the vice grip hands on it, just an all-around a beautiful play from the running back going out as a wide receiver in the red zone there. Coming up next week, it'll be the Illinois Fighting Illini coming to town. Did a little research in the break. 2 books have a look-ahead line. Will, you care to guess what the spread is in this one?
Ducks, Illinois. Ducks -7.5.
That's what I was going to say.
I'm seeing 21.
What?
Against Illinois.
Against Illinois.
They're not giving Illinois enough credit.
Look-ahead lines on... Let's see, on DraftKings, 21. On FanDuel, 22.5.
That's going to go down.
I would think so.
Get it now. Get the plus Illinois
I don't know
now.
that you can bet it now. If you can, maybe you should. But the Ducks will be favored next week at Autzen Stadium as they put their 7-0 record on the line against the now rival Fighting Illini. Thank you for joining us on the Pacific Office Automation Postgame Scoreboard Show for Will Ortner and Jordan Schultz. Thank you for joining us. The Ducks winners, 35-0. The number 2 team in the land advances to 7-0 on a Friday night. Thank you for joining us. I'm Ryan Buckley. Good night, everyone.
This has been the Pacific Office